Alan Shearer is arguably the greatest player to have ever donned the famous black and white of Newcastle United. A prolific old-school number 9, Shearer was born in the northeast, but he didn't join Newcastle until the age of 25. Shearer spent the next 10 years with his boyhood club, becoming the Magpies' all-time leading goalscorer, as well as the top scorer in the top flight of English football since 1992. Last weekend, I took a look at every Arsenal striker since Thierry Henry, and that video proved to be pretty popular. Given that Newcastle are in the news right now, with plenty of talk surrounding their potential takeover by a murderous, autocratic, genocide-inflicting billionaire thug from Saudi Arabia who makes Mike Ashley look like a saint, I thought why not do a similar video about a club close to the hearts of a couple of my colleagues. Also, a fair few people asked for it in the comments last time out. Before I start, Newcastle have had 37 strikers who have registered a first-team appearance since Alan Shearer left the club in the summer of 2006. Yes, 37, so forgive me if I skip through them rather rapidly, but if I gave them all the usual description that I afford inclusions, this video would be an hour long. Here is every Newcastle United striker since Alan Shearer. Where are they now? Albert Luque, retired. A former Spanish international who played both out wide on the left wing and through the middle as a centre forward, Albert Luque had a couple of very impressive stints in La Liga with Mallorca and Deportivo La Coruña. His time in the northeast was altogether less impressive, arriving in 2005 and departing in 2007, having only scored one league goal. The 42-year-old retired 9 years ago following a couple of seasons at Malaga, and he is now a member of staff at the Royal Spanish Football Federation. Obafemi Martins, free agent. Signed in the summer that Alan Shearer retired, Obafemi Martins had 3 good seasons at St James's Park, scoring 35 goals in 104 games. That's among the best records of any post-Shearer Newcastle striker, and Martins was a loss for Newcastle when he departed for Wolfsburg in 2009. The 35-year-old has since had spells with Rubin Kazan, Birmingham City, Levante, Seattle Sounders, and Shanghai Shenhua, but he has been without a club since 2018. Michael Owen, pundit. A tremendous but not universally popular centre-forward, Michael Owen is particularly disliked in Newcastle. The Magpies would have killed for a striker who could bag 30 goals in 79 games for them like Owen did over the last 10 years, but the England legend had a falling out with Shearer surrounding his willingness or unwillingness, depending on which side of the argument you take, to start in Newcastle's crunch final game of the 2008-09 season. Newcastle fans felt cheated by their highest earner, who left to win a Premier League title at Manchester United and retired from football to enter punditry in 2013. SHOLA AMEOBI, Newcastle loan player manager. A cult hero at St James's Park, SHOLA AMEOBI wasn't particularly prolific in the northeast, but he did score frequently in the game that matters most to Newcastle fans. Nicknamed the Mackham Slayer for just that reason, AMEOBI scored 79 goals in 397 games for Newcastle, and following brief stints at a flurry of different clubs, AMEOBI was last year appointed as Newcastle's first ever loan player manager, a fairly new role within the world of football. Andy Carroll, Newcastle United. Andy Carroll made his Newcastle United debut season after Alan Shearer left the club, and 4 years later, he left in a sensational £35 million move to Liverpool. The 6'4" centre-forward has subsequently spent 7 seasons at West Ham United before returning to Newcastle last summer. Giuseppe Rossi, Real Salt Lake. You could be forgiven for forgetting Giuseppe Rossi's loan move from Manchester United to St James's Park, given that the Italian international played just 11 league games and failed to score. He would later star for Villarreal and Fiorentina, suffering numerous injury struggles, much like Andy Carroll in fact, and the 33-year-old, who was born in the USA, is now playing in America for the first time with MLS outfit Real Salt Lake. Alan Smith, free agent. The fact that Alan Smith played 94 games for Newcastle United and didn't score a single goal tells you that he played almost exclusively as a tough tackling midfielder, but he did deputise up top at least once and therefore has to feature. The former Leeds United and Manchester United star is 39 now and has presumably retired, having been out of contract since leaving Notts County in 2018. Mark Viduka, retired. One of the most underrated centre-forwards of the Premier League era, Mark Viduka was a fantastic footballer, but he was past his best when he joined Newcastle United. Viduka scored 7 goals in 40 games for Newcastle over 2 seasons, missing 6 months of football through injury, and retiring when he left the club in 2009. Xisco, Penarol. Something of an interesting one perhaps, Xisco is among Newcastle's worst signings of the modern era. The Spaniard joined the club for £5.7 million at a time when that wasn't an insignificant amount of money in football, but he would score just 1 goal in 9 games. Now aged 33, he has been in fine form since joining Uruguayan giants Peñarol in 2019. Peter LOVENKRANDS, Rangers coach. A quick and dangerous forward who could really put his laces through a ball, Peter LOVENKRANDS technically had 2 spells at Newcastle United, although he didn't have any other club between the first and second of those 2 stints. Formerly of Rangers, LOVENKRANDS retired from football in 2014 and he has been back coaching in Glasgow since May 2017. MARLON HAREWOOD, free agent. Another player you could be forgiven for thinking had retired, MARLON HAREWOOD hasn't had a club since 2016 and he is now 40 years of age, but far be it from me to retire a player without their confirmation. Harewood's time at Newcastle came in the form of a loan move from Aston Villa and he did a decent job, scoring 5 goals in 15 games to help the Magpies secure promotion from the Championship. Leon Best, free agent. A highly rated talent at one time, Leon Best's career has been one of those hard luck stories. Signed by Newcastle from Coventry for £1.5 million, Best moved on to Blackburn for a then significant £3 million fee in 2012. Within a month, he picked up an ACL injury and his career has never really recovered. Aged 33, he hasn't even had a club since 2018 and he scored only 11 goals since leaving St James's Park 8 years ago. Nile Ranger, free agent. If Leon Best is ever feeling down in the dumps about his career, he could take some comfort from the fact he didn't balls it up nearly as badly as Nile Ranger. Very highly rated in Newcastle's youth ranks, Ranger was big, quick, good on the ball, and capable of scoring goals. Controversy followed him at every turn though, from the unprofessional to the downright criminal. Newcastle released him following his 800th indiscretion, and Ranger has been without a club since being sacked by Southend United due to recurring disciplinary issues in January 2018. Ryan Donaldson, Hartlepool United. A graduate of the Newcastle Academy, Ryan Donaldson only made 6 appearances at St James's Park, failing to score a goal. Stints at Gateshead, Cambridge United and Plymouth Argyle followed, and the 28-year-old former England youth international now plays in the National League for Hartlepool United. Phil Airy, Whitley Bay. I'm sure many subscribers to this channel will disagree, but I like to think of myself as someone who knows a little bit about football, or at least someone who follows the sport with interest. I must admit though, I have zero recollection of ever having heard the name Phil Airy before in my life. He did play 1 game for Newcastle United as a centre-forward in the FA Cup though, and therefore he has to feature. The 28-year-old has been contracted to non-league Blythe Spartan since leaving Newcastle in 2012, and he is currently on loan at Whitley Bay, who play in the 10th tier of English football. Shefki Kuchi, retired. The Flying Finn Shefki Kuchi was a bit of an unusual signing by then newly appointed Newcastle manager Alan Pardew back in the 2010-11 season. Already a nomadic footballer, Kuchi played just 6 games for Newcastle and failed to score, and the 43-year-old retired from football in 2013 with the exception of a brief comeback in 2016 in his native Finland. Sami AMEOBI, Nottingham Forest. Brother to the previously mentioned SHOLA, I've only ever seen Sami AMEOBI playing as a winger, but apparently he did play centrally on occasion at St James's Park. AMEOBI showed hints of his talent in Newcastle, but not a lot of final product, and he left the club in 2017 for Bolton Wanderers. AMEOBI left Bolton following the club's financial collapse last summer and signed for Championship side Nottingham Forest. Demba Ba, Istanbul Başakşehir. If you asked most Newcastle fans to name the club's best strikers since Shearer, I suspect Demba Ba would come out on top. The Senegalese marksman signed for Newcastle following relegation at West Ham on a free transfer, and it was a no-brainer given Ba's talents. He scored 29 goals in 58 games during his 18 months at St James's Park, but the club were powerless to prevent Chelsea from triggering his ridiculously cheap £7 million release clause. Ba has since played for Besiktas, Shanghai Shenhua, Göztepe and now Istanbul Başakşehir, but he may well end up being best remembered for profiteering expertly following a Steven Gerrard trip. Papiss Cissé, Antalyaspor. The Demba Ba and Papiss Cissé partnership was, for a brief period, among the most electric in the Premier League. Newcastle fans must have thought they'd won the lottery when Cissé arrived mid-season from Freiburg and bagged 13 goals in 14 games. Unsurprisingly, he couldn't maintain that record, but his minutes per goal ratio remained impressive. Like Ba, he has since played in China and Turkey, currently contracted to Super League outfit Antalyaspor. Yohan Gufran, Ararat Armenia. Yohan Gufran had a couple of very good seasons at Bordeaux before signing for Newcastle United, and he didn't have a bad first 18 months in the northeast either. Capable of playing out wide or through the middle, Gouffran was phased out following Alan Pardew's departure, and he now plays for Armenian Premier League champions Ararat Armenia. Adam Campbell, Darlington. Not to be confused with the actor Adam Campbell, who starred in such cinematic masterpieces as Date Movie and Epic Movie, the Adam Campbell who played for Newcastle United, is yet to make his Hollywood debut. Campbell, who represented England at 3 different youth levels, played just 5 games for Newcastle, and subsequently struggled for goals at Notts County and Morecambe. Since joining non-league Darlington last summer though, the 25-year-old has been excellent. Loic Remy, Lille. In that imaginary poll on Newcastle's best post-Shearer striker that I said I thought Demba Ba would win, I suspect Loic Remy wouldn't be too far behind, and perhaps he would be ahead if he had stuck around at the club for a bit longer. Remy spent a season on loan at Newcastle from relegated Queen's Park Rangers, and he bagged 14 goals in 26 games. His form was so good that Chelsea signed him the following summer, but Remy barely featured for the Blues and has been with Lille since 2018. Luke de Jong, Sevilla. Whilst Loic Remy starred at Newcastle United and subsequently struggled, Luke de Jong's career trajectory has been just about the opposite. The Dutchman didn't score in 12 Premier League appearances on loan at Newcastle, but he joined PSV the following summer where he would bag 112 goals in 204 games over the next 5 seasons, and last summer he secured a move to La Liga's side Sevilla. Adam Armstrong, Blackburn Rovers. Tony Mowbray has shrewdly built a very decent side at Blackburn Rovers, and in the absence of Bradley Dack, Adam Armstrong is his primary attacking weapon. Quick and a constant threat, Armstrong was very highly thought of at Newcastle, but things just never worked out and the club were willing to sell him to Blackburn in 2018. Still only 23, I'm rarely not impressed when watching him in action, and a return to the Premier League with Blackburn or without seems a distinct possibility at some stage. Ayoze Perez, Leicester City. It took a bit of time for Ayoze Perez to really get going at Newcastle United, and he was someone who tended to score goals in little 5 or 6 game patches. Nevertheless, he was Newcastle's top scorer last season with 12 league goals and 13 in all competitions, and that was enough to convince Leicester City that he was worth £30 million in the summer. Emmanuel Riviere, Cosenza. A striker who could accurately be described as absolutely useless at St James's Park, Emmanuel Riviere scored 1 goal from 26 Premier League games at Newcastle United. The 30-year-old now plays for Cosenza in Italy's Serie B. Seydou Doumbia, free agent. A man who would bag you 3 goals a game on Ultimate Team back in the day, speed merchant Seydou Doumbia couldn't quite translate his fictional FIFA form into real life at Newcastle United. He scored no goals in 3 games on loan in the North East, and he was one of 9 players sacked by Swiss club Sion last month for refusing to take a pay cut in light of the recent global health crisis. Ivan Toney, Peterborough United. A man with a very similar record to Seydou Doumbia at Newcastle United, Ivan Toney scored no goals in 4 first-team games at St James's Park. Peterborough United picked up the striker for around £650,000 in 2018, and they will make a tasty profit on that when they come to selling the frontman. The Posh have a great record in terms of strikers, and Toney is up there with the best of them, having scored 40 goals in 76 league games since his arrival. Alexander Mitrovic, Fulham. Soon to be Serbia's all-time record goalscorer, despite being aged only 25, Alexander Mitrovic endeared himself to a number of Newcastle fans, many of whom wanted to see the club hang their hat on him as their number 9. The club couldn't resist a bid worth up to £27 million from Fulham in 2018 though, following an impressive loan spell, and Mitrovic surprised some people by staying at Craven Cottage despite Fulham's relegation last season. Dwight Gale, Newcastle United. Only the second player in this list who is still at Newcastle United, Dwight Gale joined the Magpies in 2016. A classic case of a striker who seems too good for the Championship but not quite good enough for the Premier League. Gale's goals fired Rafa Benitez's Newcastle to promotion, but he could only manage 6 in the Premier League the following season. He was prolific once again last season in the Championship with West Bromwich Albion, but he hasn't scored in 13 appearances back at St James's this season. Daryl Murphy, Bolton Wanderers. A man signed very much in the hope of helping Newcastle get out of the Championship, rather than any aspirations of him starring in the Premier League. Daryl Murphy fulfilled his role at St James's Park. The late bloomer, who previously played for Newcastle's rival Sunderland, spent just a season at Newcastle, and the 37-year-old is now contracted to Bolton Wanderers. Islam Slimani, Monaco. One of the myriad of centre-forwards to have struggled to adapt to life in the Premier League over the years, Islam Slimani looked to revive his career in England with Newcastle following a difficult start at Leicester City. It didn't work. He scored no goals in 4 Premier League games, but he is now scoring for fun once again in France with Monaco and was even linked with the move to Manchester United a couple of months ago, but the Red Devils ultimately ended up signing Odion Ighalo. Joselu, Alaves. When Newcastle United signed Joselu, who had only scored 4 goals in 27 games for Stoke City, I don't think too many fans were expecting the next Alan Shearer. Those fans would be in for a shock, not because Joselu was the next Shearer, but because he was even worse than they first feared. Nevertheless, he too has now rediscovered his goal-scoring form in Spain with Alaves. Salomon Rondon, Dalian Professional. If we once again return to my totally made-up poll of Newcastle fans on their best striker since Shearer, I suspect Salomon Rondon would be the man to join Demba Ba and Loic Remy to round off the top 3. Rondon also didn't arrive with enormous expectations, joining on loan from relegated West Brom in a swap deal involving Dwight Gale having failed to hit double figures in the Premier League during his 3 seasons with the Baggies. Rondon bagged 11 in 32 at St James's, leading Rafa Benitez's line with strength and authority, and many were disappointed to see Rondon not signed permanently last summer. Instead, he followed Rafa Benitez to the Chinese Super League for a big payday at Dalian Professional. Yoshinori Muto, Newcastle United. I watched Yoshinori Muto a couple of times during his time with Mainz in the Bundesliga, and I thought the Magpies might have a player on their hands when they signed him in 2018. As of yet, it hasn't really transpired like that, with the Japanese international only having had a limited involvement and failing to chip in with many goal contributions. Joelinton, Newcastle United. The penultimate inclusion in this lengthy list of Newcastle United's 37 post-Shearer strikers, Joelinton isn't really a striker, but that's where he's playing at St James's Park. Signed from Hoffenheim for a club record £40 million, Newcastle seem to be hoping for a 20-goal Shearer-like frontman to lead the line and find the back of the net on a regular basis. If they were, they can't have been scouting him for very long. That isn't Joelinton's game, it never has been, and he'll continue to be ineffective until Newcastle realise that fact. Thomas Allen, Newcastle United. A 20-year-old striker from the city of Newcastle, Thomas Allen, made his Newcastle United debut in January 2020 in a 4-1 FA Cup win against Rochdale. A big, strong young lad, Allen has scored plenty of goals in more than 100 appearances in Newcastle's youth ranks. That's it for today's 7. Thanks for watching, give us a like if you enjoyed the video, and obviously make sure you're subscribed to HITC Sevens. Also, if you're watching on mobile, just try tapping your screen now. Apparently that is sometimes required to bring up our little subscribe button and a couple of other videos that YouTube thinks you might enjoy.